Some things on the internet are not meant to be found. They lurk in the shadows, waiting.
A perfect American life, built brick by brick. His name was Walter Kern, and if you'd met him, you would have liked him immediately. That's not me editorializing. That's the consistent, documented, almost statistically improbable consensus of every single person who knew him. You would have liked him. That's the part that matters. Walter was born in 1951 in Akron, Ohio, third of 4 children. Father worked the line at a rubber plant. Mother cleaned houses 3 days a week and made everything from scratch on the other 4. They were not rich. They were not unhappy. They were the kind of family that teaches you the value of keeping your head down and your lawn trimmed and your business to yourself, and Walter learned all of it. He enlisted at 19, spent 14 months stateside, never saw combat, was honorably discharged and back in Akron before his 20th birthday. He didn't talk about the military much. Not because it was painful, people said, just because Walter wasn't a man who took up more space than he needed to. He married Carol in 1974. She was 22. He was 23. They bought a house on Delwood Avenue, 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a garage he converted into a workspace, and they built a life inside it the way people used to. Deliberately, quietly, brick by brick. 2 kids, a daughter, Melissa, born in 1976, a son, Daniel, born in 1979. Walter coached Daniel's soccer team for 4 seasons. He never missed a single one of Melissa's school plays, not one in 12 years. Which is interesting because some of those nights, he told Carol he was working late. He managed the hardware store on Reimer Road for 19 years. Knew every regular by name. Knew what projects they were working on. Remembered where they'd left off. His co-worker Patty Sewell told investigators, and I want you to hold on to this quote, because it will feel very different by the time we're done, she said. Walter was the kind of man you just trusted automatically. You didn't decide to trust him. It just happened. We are very good, as a society, at manufacturing men like Walter, at building the conditions that produce them, celebrating the aesthetics of them, and then acting stunned when the interior doesn't match the exterior. We've been stunned about it for decades. We keep being stunned. Now, the workspace in the garage was off limits. Not aggressively. Walter never made a scene about it. It was just understood. Carol called it his decompression space. The kids respected it the way kids respect the rules they've never had to be told twice. Nobody questioned it. Nobody thought to. For most people, this is where the story ends. Normal man, normal life, unremarkable death. But Walter Kern's story didn't end. It cracked open, and what came out of that crack has never fully been explained. Something was always wrong. We just weren't looking. It's 1994. Carol Kern is folding laundry on a Sunday afternoon. Walter is at the hardware store, or says he is. The kids are grown enough to be elsewhere. The house is quiet in that particular way that used to feel like peace. She finds a receipt that's tucked inside the breast pocket of a jacket she's pulling from the hamper. Gas station receipt. Unremarkable. Except the gas station is in Millfield, a town 47 miles from Akron, 47 miles from the hardware store, 47 miles from anywhere Walter had mentioned being in the last month. She looks at the date. A Tuesday. He'd told her he was covering a closing shift. She puts it on the counter. She finishes the laundry. When Walter comes home, she holds it up. He doesn't miss a beat. Drove out to price a lumber delivery, he says. Forgot to mention it. You hungry? I could eat. And that was it. That was the whole conversation. Carol told her sister about it years later, not because it frightened her, but because she'd thought about it and couldn't find anything wrong with the answer. He had a reason. He always had a reason. She said, That was just Walter. He had an explanation for everything, and the explanations were always just boring enough to be true. I'll come back to that receipt in a moment, because what's on it changes the entire shape of this story. But here's what I need you to understand first. The receipt wasn't the beginning. It wasn't even close to the beginning. It was just the first moment a thread became visible above the surface. The rest of it, all of it, had been running underneath for years. In 1988, a 23-year-old woman named Darlene Houst went missing from a rest stop on Route 30, 41 miles from Akron. The case went cold within 8 months. No suspect, no body, no answers. Her family is still alive. They are still asking. Walter Kern's name never appeared in that investigation, but his car did appear, once, briefly, in a witness statement taken 3 weeks after Darlene disappeared, parked at a diner 6 miles from that rest stop on the night in question. The witness said a man matching his description ate alone at the counter, paid in cash, and left without speaking to anyone. The statement was logged. It was never followed up on. The detective assigned to the case retired in 2001. The file was archived. There's a photograph, too, found much later, and I want to be careful about how I describe it. It's a Polaroid. It shows a woman, not Carol, not Melissa, standing outside a building that investigators eventually identified as a storage facility 22 miles from Delwood Avenue. She is not posing. She doesn't appear to know the picture is being taken. On the back, in Walter's handwriting, is a date. Thin sentences now, because this is where the air changes. The photo has a number on it. Not a name, a number. And it isn't one. This is the part that makes my chest tighten every single time I go back through the documents. Because if that number is what investigators eventually concluded it was, a count, not a label, then the receipt from Millfield, the diner near Route 30, the locked garage on Delwood Avenue, none of them are separate threads at all. They're the same thread. The family didn't see it, but someone else did. Someone who'd been watching for years, and who almost didn't say anything she told people. Nobody listened. Her name was Ruthin Bellick. She was 61 years old when the Kerns moved into Delwood Avenue, which made her 73 by the time she started keeping notes. She had lived in her house for 39 years, raised 4 children in it, buried a husband in the middle of it, and developed the particular brand of sharp, undeceivable perception that comes from decades of watching a street breathe. She did not like Walter Kern from the beginning, not in a dramatic way, not in a way she could easily explain. She told her daughter Ellen, "It ain't nothing he does. It's the way he watches you stop doing things when he walks by, like he's taking inventory." Ellen told her she was being uncharitable. Ruthin started writing things down in 1986. A composition notebook, the black and white kind, college-ruled. She logged dates, times, license plates of cars she didn't recognize parked briefly in front of the Kern house late at night. She noted the lights in the garage that stayed on past 2 in the morning when Walter claimed, to anyone who asked, that he kept early hours. She wrote down the names of 2 women she saw enter that garage on separate occasions. Neither of them Carol, neither of them anyone she recognized from the neighborhood, and she wrote down, very carefully, that she never saw either woman leave. She brought the notebook to the Delwood Avenue Block Association meeting in the fall of 1993. She was given 4 minutes. Halfway through, someone interrupted to ask whether this was really the appropriate venue. The meeting moved on to a discussion about the broken streetlight on the corner. 3 people heard her that night. 2 of them are still alive. Neither of them has spoken publicly about it. In 1997, Ruthin walked directly into the Summit County Sheriff's Office and asked to speak with someone about a neighbor. She waited 40 minutes. A deputy took her notebook, photocopied 7 pages, handed it back, and told her they'd look into it. She followed up 3 times over the following year. Each time, she was told the matter was under review. It was not under review. What she wrote in that notebook goes well beyond those 7 photocopied pages. The full document, all 43 pages of it, was recovered from her home after her death in 2009 and entered into evidence during the subsequent investigation. I've seen references to its contents in secondary documents. What she wrote down is, it's a lot. I'll get to it. Here's what I keep coming back to, though. Ruthin Bellick was not hysterical. She was not confused. She was a 73-year-old woman with a composition notebook, a working set of eyes, and the absolute conviction that something was wrong inside that house. If you've ever had a gut feeling about someone that nobody took seriously, drop it in the comments. Because this story is going to make you trust your instincts a lot more. She was right about almost everything. The parts she got wrong, those were somehow worse. The documents that shouldn't exist. I spent 11 days trying to get access to these files. The first 3 people I contacted didn't respond. The 4th told me to stop asking. Not rudely, not with any particular hostility, just quietly, and with the kind of finality that makes you understand the conversation is over before you finish processing what was said. That response told me more than any document could have. Here is what I was able to verify independently. I'll give it to you the way I had to build it, piece by piece, in the order the pieces surfaced. 1982, Walter Kern rents a storage unit at Clearpath Self-Storage on Industrial Parkway. Unit 114, 10 by 12 feet. He pays in cash every month for 11 consecutive years. The facility's records show no access logs for the first 4 years, standard practice for the era. Beginning in 1986, the access logs do exist. Walter visited Unit 114 an average of twice per month, always on weekdays, always between the hours of 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. 1984, a P.O. box is opened at the Akron, Maine post office under the name W. Carver. The handwriting on the application was later matched by a forensic document examiner to Walter Kern. The box received correspondence regularly until 1996, at which point it was quietly closed. What it received, and from whom, is, and I want to be precise here, not fully part of the public record. Portions of the retrieved mail were cataloged. Portions were not. 1989. Walter purchases a second property, not in his name, in the name of a limited liability company registered in Delaware, a state chosen, almost certainly, because Delaware's disclosure requirements at the time were among the most minimal in the country. The property is a 4-acre parcel outside the town of Seville, Ohio, 43 miles from Delwood Avenue. There is a structure on it, a single-room outbuilding, concrete floor, no windows. 1991 through 1997, library borrowing records. Yes, these were subpoenaed. Yes, they exist. Show Walter checking out a specific and consistent category of material. Land surveying manuals, agricultural drainage guides, a technical publication on soil composition and load-bearing capacity. I want you to sit with that last one for a second. He was a hardware store manager. He was not a farmer. He was not a surveyor. And he checked that drainage guide out 4 separate times over 6 years, which means either the information wasn't sticking, or he was going back to a specific page. 1998, the Delaware LLC is dissolved. The Seville property is transferred, through 2 intermediate transactions, to a third party whose connection to Walter Kern has never been publicly established. That third party sold the land in 2004. It has since been cleared and redeveloped. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think you will either. Now, here is where the register breaks down for me, where the clinical voice I've been trying to hold on to just fails. Because when you lay all of this out in sequence, what you're looking at isn't a man who made mistakes and tried to cover them. What you're looking at is infrastructure, deliberately built, patiently maintained, funded and organized and sustained across 3 decades with the kind of quiet, methodical competence that most people can't bring to their tax returns. He was meticulous, he was patient, and he was, for 30 years, completely invisible inside all of it. There's one more document I haven't mentioned yet. I'm saving it for later because you need the full context to understand what you're looking at when you see it. Paper can hide a lot, but it can't hide everything. Because at some point, he started talking, and someone was recording. He knew exactly what he was. They found the tapes in the garage. Not the basement, the garage. The decompression space. Carol's word for it. You'll remember. They were stored inside a fireproof lockbox bolted to the underside of the workbench, hidden beneath a false panel so seamlessly fitted that the forensics team nearly missed it entirely. Inside, 11 microcassettes, each one labeled in Walter's handwriting with a number and a date. The earliest was recorded in 1979. The most recent, 4 days before his death. He had been doing this for 24 years, talking to himself, explaining himself, leaving a record that, as far as anyone can determine, he never intended anyone to find, and yet kept adding to anyway, with the dedication of someone who needed to be understood, even if only by the version of himself that would listen back later. I want you to understand what it felt like to read the transcripts, because I've read them. And the thing that unmade me, the thing I was completely unprepared for, was not the content. It was the tone. Walter Kern, on those tapes, sounds exactly like Walter Kern at the Block Association barbecue. Measured, thoughtful, almost gentle. The first tape opens mid-sentence, as if he'd already been thinking out loud before he hit record. He says, "The difference between people who do things and people who only ever think about doing them is simpler than anyone wants to admit. It's just will. That's the whole secret. Will and patience and not needing anyone else to tell you that you're allowed. That's the first 30 seconds. By the third tape, recorded sometime in 1984, he's developed what I can only describe as a philosophy. He talks about what he calls the arrangement. His term, never defined explicitly, always referenced as if the listener already knows what it means. He says, the arrangement works because I respect it. I've always been careful. That's the part they'll never understand, the care I took. Most people who end up caught, they got sloppy because they stopped believing it mattered. I never stopped. He says this the way a craftsman talks about joinery, the way a surgeon talks about technique. There is pride in it, not the swaggering pride of someone performing for an audience, but the quiet, internal pride of a man who has held himself to a standard and met it, day after day, for years. That is so much worse than arrogance. Arrogance you can dismiss. This you cannot. The sixth tape, 1991, the same year as the Polaroid, is the one investigators flagged first. He speaks for 42 minutes. The transcript of that tape alone runs to 19 pages. He talks about specific dates, specific locations. He talks about the storage unit in a way that confirms what the paper trail implied, but could not prove. And then, about 37 minutes in, his voice changes, just slightly, just enough, and he says, "There are things I've done that I don't regret. I want to be honest about that, at least here. I don't regret them. What I feel, when I think about them, is closer to." And here, I have to pause for a second. Because the next word he uses, the word Walter Kern chooses, in 1991, alone in his garage at 1 in the morning, To describe what he feels when he thinks about what he's done, that word is satisfaction. Take a breath. I mean that. Take an actual breath, because we're about to go somewhere you can't ungo. I'll be honest with you. There's a dark, exhausted part of my brain that finds it almost funny, in the least funny way possible, that this man kept better records of his own crimes than most businesses keep of their quarterly earnings. Walter Kern, meticulous to the end. 5 stars, would not recommend. The recording cuts out there. Tape malfunction, the magnetic strip degraded. But it comes back. 40 seconds of static, and then his voice again, mid-sentence, quieter now. And what he says when it comes back, the thing he says in those final minutes of the 6th tape, I need you to be ready for it. It recontextualizes everything. The garage, the storage unit, the Seville property, all of it. The tapes told us what he thought of himself. What they found in the basement told us everything else. The room at the end of the ordinary house. The first officer through the door was a patrol deputy named Gus Farrell. 12 years on the force. He'd worked domestics, overdoses, a fatal accident on I-76 that he'd described, in a recorded deposition, as the worst thing he'd ever seen professionally. He lasted 90 seconds in that basement. He walked back up the stairs, out through the kitchen, past the living room with its family photographs and its bowl of decorative fruit, out the front door of 4417 Delwood Avenue, and sat on the porch steps. When his partner came out to check on him, Farrell looked up and said, Call everyone. Call everyone you can think of. And don't go down there by yourself. Let me tell you what he saw. The basement was accessed through a door in the kitchen, standard hollow core, 6-panel, the kind you'd find in any house built in the 70s. Except this one had 3 deadbolts on the interior side. Not the exterior, the inside, which means the locks were not designed to keep people out. They were designed to keep something from getting out, or to keep Walter in, undisturbed, while he worked. The stairs were wooden. They'd been carpeted, gray, low pile, the carpet tacked down with unusual precision, no bubbling, no peeling edges. The kind of attention to detail that reads as care. The temperature at the bottom of those stairs was, according to the forensics report, 61 degrees. The basement had a dedicated cooling unit, a through-wall air conditioner mounted near the ceiling, a model typically used for server rooms or medical storage. It had been running, investigators estimated, for somewhere between 10 and 15 years. The smell was chemical, not decay, not primarily. Underneath it, yes, there were biological notes that the forensics team documented and that I will not itemize here. But the dominant smell was something antiseptic, industrial, the kind of smell that means someone has been cleaning this room with serious intention for a very long time. The lighting was fluorescent. 4 strips mounted to the ceiling, all functional, all humming. No shadows. Walter had eliminated shadows from this room entirely. The walls were lined with shelving units, metal, the kind sold at hardware stores in flat-pack boxes, bolted directly into the concrete. And on those shelves, labeled containers, plastic bins, each one marked in Walter's handwriting with a number and a 2-letter code. Rows of them, dozens. The forensics team spent 4 days cataloging the contents, and I want to be clear that the official summary of what those bins contained runs to 31 pages. 31 pages that in the center of the room was a work table. Steel surface, sealed edges, drain fitting in the center connected to a secondary line that ran, not to the municipal sewer, investigators discovered, but to a sealed tank buried beneath the concrete floor. The tank had been pumped, recently, within weeks of Walter's death. He knew he was dying. He had time to prepare. Sergeant Diana Crowell led the full forensic walkthrough on day 2. 15-year veteran. She has given, by my count, 2 public statements about what she encountered in that basement, both of them carefully worded, both of them stopping well short of the full picture. In the second statement, she said, "The thing that affected me most wasn't any single item. It was the system, the organizational system. That's what I still think about." On the back wall, partially obscured by a shelving unit that had to be moved, they found a calendar. A standard wall calendar, the kind given away free at insurance offices, with a landscape photograph for each month. This one was open to October. The year was 1987, and on it, in small, neat print, 31 dates were marked. Not all of October. 31 specific dates, spanning years that had been written in the margins in different colored inks. Blue, then black, then red, as if the pen had changed but the hand had not. Nobody has fully explained the calendar. Not publicly. There is one thing in that basement that the official report lists and then immediately redacts. One item. A single line in the evidence catalog, item 47, with everything after the item number blacked out. I have a theory about what it is. I'll tell you at the end. There was something else. Something that doesn't fit the profile, doesn't fit the methodology, doesn't fit anything a rational behavioral analysis produces when you run the rest of the evidence through it. In the far corner of the basement, on the floor, with no shelf above it and no label beside it, there was a child's music box. White lacquer, painted roses on the lid. When forensics opened it, it played 8 bars of a lullaby. It had no fingerprints on it. Not Walter's. Not anyone's. It had been wiped, but not recently. The surface had collected dust in the years since, a thin, even layer, which meant it had been sitting there, unhandled, for a long time. Possibly years. Walter had no grandchildren. His children had no children. There was no music box in any inventory of the Kern household ever produced, not by insurance, not by any family member's recollection. Nobody knows where it came from. Here's what makes it worse. This wasn't the end of something. According to the timeline, it was bar. Let me show you what 30 years looks like when you lay it flat. The 70s. 1974, Walter marries Carol. They buy the house on Delwood Avenue. He pours the concrete floor in the garage himself, over one weekend, while Carol visits her mother. Nobody thinks anything of it. Men pour concrete. That's a thing men do. 1977, Jimmy Carter is in the White House. Star Wars is in theaters. America is doing that particular thing it does, looking outward, looking upward, looking anywhere but at itself. Walter is 26 years old and, according to the 6th tape, already 3 years into what he calls the arrangement. He is coaching Daniel's soccer team. He is bringing paper plates to the block party. He is, by every available account, thriving. The 80s. 1982, Walter rents Unit 114 at Clearpath Self-Storage. Cash. Always cash. The same year, the country is white-knuckling a recession and the news is full of fear about things happening elsewhere, to other people. Darlene Houst is still alive. She has 6 more years. 1986, the Challenger explodes. The country stops, grieves collectively, publicly, in that way that feels briefly like unity. Walter installs the first deadbolt on the basement door, then the second, then, 6 months later, the third. 1988, Darlene Houst disappears from a rest stop on Route 30. Her case goes cold. Walter begins recording the 6th tape. The 90s. 1991, the Gulf War. Yellow ribbons on every door on Delwood Avenue, including Walter's. He drives to the Seville property twice that month. The Polaroid is taken. The calendar on the basement wall acquires new markings in red ink. 1993. The World Trade Center is bombed for the first time. The country is shaken, briefly, then moves on. Walter installs a cooling unit in the basement. A medical grade one. He tells Carol it's for humidity control. She believes him. Why wouldn't she? 1996. Walter's mother dies. He drives back to Akron from the funeral, alone, stops somewhere between the church and Delwood Avenue, and doesn't arrive home for 4 hours. Carol doesn't ask where he was. She's grieving too. This is the moment, the one I keep returning to. This is where a different man might have felt something shift, might have let the weight of mortality crack something open. He didn't. The tapes from that month are the calmest of all of them. The 2000s. 2001, September. The whole world watching the same screens. Walter is 50 years old. He has been doing this for 24 years. He is, according to everyone who knows him, the same as he has always been. Steady, warm, reliable. He brings food to the neighbors gathering around televisions on Delwood Avenue. He stays for hours. He is the last one to leave. He goes home. He goes downstairs. And somewhere, in another state, in another file in another police department's archive, there is a case that rhymes with this one. Different name, different city, same pattern. I'm not ready to talk about that yet. 30 years is a long time to keep a secret, which means, mathematically, statistically, he wasn't keeping it completely alone. I want to be precise about something before I go any further. The people I'm about to describe are not Walter Kern. They did not build the basement. They did not rent Unit 114. They did not make the calendar or take the Polaroid or record 11 microcassettes in a locked garage for 24 years. I want to be clear about that, because what I'm about to tell you is complicated, and complicated things deserve precision, but here is also what's true. Evil of this scale and duration does not survive in a vacuum. It survives in the spaces between what people know and what they choose to do with what they know. It survives in hesitation, in pragmatism, in the very human, very ordinary decision to not make things harder for yourself. Richard Kern, Walter's younger brother. 3 years between them. Richard lived until 2018 in Columbus. By every account, the brothers were close. Monthly phone calls, annual fishing trips up to Lake Erie. In the evidence recovered from the garage, there are 2 letters from Richard, dated 1989 and 1994, that investigators flagged as significant. I've seen references to their content in legal filings. The letters don't confess knowledge directly. They don't need to. The specific questions Richard does not ask, given what the letters are responding to, the careful, deliberate shape of his not asking, is its own kind of answer. Richard Kern died of a stroke in February 2018, 8 months before investigators came for the house on Delwood Avenue. Pastor Glenn Murtaugh. Walter attended Calvary Lutheran on Whitmore Road for 21 years. Murtaugh was his pastor for 17 of them. In 2019, Murtaugh gave a single interview to a local paper in which he said, and I'm paraphrasing carefully here, that he had prayed extensively about his conversations with Walter and believed he had acted in accordance with his conscience. Pastoral confidentiality is real. It is also, in this context, a door that was closed from the inside, while something burned on the other side of it. Dr. Carolyn Fitch, a licensed therapist in private practice in Akron. Walter saw her for 8 months in 1995. Records confirm this, because the insurance claims existed. What was discussed in those sessions is protected, except that Dr. Fitch discontinued Walter's treatment abruptly in March 1996, without referral, without documented clinical reason. She still holds her license. She is still in practice that I'm going to leave her name there and let you sit with that. Thomas Wheely, Walter's co-worker at the hardware store for 11 years, the one who would have covered his shifts without asking why, who signed off on overtime hours that didn't exist, who, when investigators spoke to him in 2019, said he didn't remember much, and whose hands, according to the detective present, didn't stop moving for the entire interview. I want to ask you something directly. If you had known, not everything, but enough, what would you have done? I've thought about this a lot. I don't love my answer. I think most of us believe we do the right thing, and I think most of us, in the actual moment, with the actual social cost in front of us, would find reasons to wait. To be sure, to not cause a scene. Ruthin Bellick didn't wait. She brought a composition notebook to a block association meeting and was given 4 minutes and ignored entirely. And she went back, and she tried again, and she kept writing things down until she died. She deserves to be said by name one more time. He died in 2018. Natural causes, they said, and everyone assumed the story was over. It wasn't. It's still not what's still out there. Walter Kern died on October 14, 2018. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 8 months prior. He died at home, in the house on Delwood Avenue, in a hospital bed set up in the living room. Carol was with him. Melissa drove in from Pittsburgh. Daniel flew in from Portland. By all accounts, it was a quiet death. A peaceful one. The investigation began 11 months later, when the estate was being settled and a contractor hired to renovate the basement discovered that the cooling unit didn't connect to any system he recognized. The legal aftermath was, in the way of these things, both extensive and insufficient. The Seville property was re-examined, ground-penetrating radar, the works. What they found there is part of an ongoing investigation, and I am going to respect that boundary. Not because I don't want to tell you, but because there are families still waiting for information that deserves to reach them before it reaches us. The storage unit had been emptied. Professionally, thoroughly, recently. Unit 114 at Clearpath Self-Storage was found completely clean, not abandoned, clean. Someone had been there after Walter's diagnosis and before his death. That person has not been identified. The Delaware LLC, the Seville Property Transfers, the P.O. Box under W. Carver. Investigators have traced portions of this network. Portions. There are threads that end not in answers, but in other threads, connected to records in other counties, other states, that are either sealed or, and this is the part that keeps me awake, simply missing. Now, item 47. The redacted entry in the evidence catalog from the basement of 4417 Delwood Avenue. I promised you a theory. Here's what I think it was. Based on the surrounding catalog entries, items 45 and 46 are communication devices, a shortwave radio receiver, and an encrypted pager, and based on a single line in Ruthin Bellick's notebook, written in 1998, where she describes seeing a man she didn't recognize standing at the Kern's front door for less than 30 seconds before being let inside. I think item 47 was a directory. Names, contacts, people connected to the arrangement, Walter's word, who were not Walter. People who are still, right now, somewhere, living versions of the life Walter lived on Delwood Avenue. That's my theory. I could be wrong. I have been wrong before, and I will tell you when I am. If anyone has information about the Seville property transfers, or about the W. Carver P.O. Box, or about any unsolved cases in Summit County between 1979 and 2009 with geographic links to the locations in this story, the comments are open. Some of you have found things before that I couldn't. I'm not above asking for help. This story rhymes with one I told 8 months ago, The case I called the Henderson Archive, for those of you who were here for it. Different man, different state, same patients.